Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. And welcome to today's webinar entitled Indonesia's and Malaysia's Education Sectors Today, International Education Market Updates, Trends and Developments. My name is Tom Wang, and I'm the Manager of Market Support and Partnership Development at the BC Council for International Education. Thank you again for joining us today on what promises to be a great opportunity to learn updates about the education sectors from the two important Southeast Asia countries, Indonesia and Malaysia. Today's webinar is co-hosted by BCCIE and Trade Commissioner Service, Global Affairs Canada. Before we get started and prior to introducing our presenters, it is important I acknowledge at BCCIE, we live and work on unceded traditional territories of the Coastal Salish peoples of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today, Julia Pankey, Trade Commissioner, and Alan Frankenberger, Counselor, Migration Section. Both of them are from the Embassy of Canada in Jakarta. And today we also have Thomas Abbott, Acting Senior Trade Commissioner, and Bethany Tian, Trade Commissioner from the High Commission of Canada in Malaysia. Now allow me to turn over the floor to our first presenter, Julia. Julia, now you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julia Pankey, and I'm the Trade Commissioner for Education at the Embassy of Canada in Indonesia. Next slide, please, Tom. Sorry. So this will be some of the topics that I will cover today, and I will begin this presentation by giving a brief overview of the Indonesian market. Next slide, please, Tom. So Indonesia is the world's fourth most populated country with around 50% of the population under the age of 30. Indonesia is also the 16th largest economy in the world and is predicted to be on the top 10 by 2030. Indonesia also has the largest middle class in Southeast Asia, and it is growing quickly. It is the key factor behind the increasing number of Indonesian students interested in and able to continue their study abroad. Next slide, please, Tom. So next slide, please, Tom. UNESCO data predicted that around 45,000 Indonesian students study abroad in 2017. The number is expected to grow as the number of middle-class families continues to grow. Canada is one of the countries that has benefited from this growth. ISEF report stated that around 40% Indonesian students in Canada, there were 40% more Indonesian students in Canada in 2018 than in 2017. The report also noted that other leading English-speaking countries are seeing flat to declining growth for the same year. For example, Australia saw steady number of Indonesian students in Australia, while the UK and the US are seeing a decrease in the number of Indonesian students for the same year. That said, Australia remained the #1 market for Indonesia, not only due to its proximity, but also because Australian schools are known to be more flexible in terms of entry requirements. And they are also, according to some agents and students, they are also providing faster response to inquiries coming in from students and agents. Meanwhile, Malaysia, though not one of the English-speaking destinations, are quite popular among Indonesians due to its cultural similarities. Other Asian countries that are coming in strong, including Japan, Korea, China, and Singapore, they are also actively recruiting in Indonesia and do come with scholarship. Listed here are some of the most popular programs chosen by Indonesian students when studying abroad. So you can see there are business, computer or IT, engineering, art and design, biological science, social science, psychology, and communications. Next slide, please, Tom. So these are some of the main factors considered by Indonesian students when choosing where they want to study. Number one is proximity. That is why Australia has the largest market share in Indonesia. Number two is quality or ranking. That is also why the US and the UK are next in line due to the number of their world university ranking. But important to note that some Asian universities are also moving up to the ranking and are being considered as another options for Indonesian students, not only because of their proximity to Indonesia, but also for their positions in the world ranking. So institutions like NUS in Singapore, Peking University in China, or Tsinghua University in China, these are some of the universities that are quite popular in Indonesia as well. Price is also a factor for Indonesia. Although majority of the Indonesian students are self-funded, Indonesian parents are still mindful of the price and they would jump to the opportunity of scholarship. Number four is the post-graduation work permit or the PGWP. It is a plus point for Canada. But bear in mind that now other countries are also considering giving these options to international students. The next item is the co-op program. It is another plus point for Canada. This program is very popular among Indonesian students and parents, and Canada is known as a country with large co-op network. Lastly is the quality of life. Canada is seen in Indonesia as a multicultural country and are welcoming and open to international students. Next slide, please, Tom. So in this slide, you will see the number of Indonesian students in Canada, and on the right side is the number of Indonesian students in BC. This number is taken from IRCC data for the year the permit become effective. As you can see that there are around 50% of Indonesian students studying in BC. In the next slide, I will provide breakdown by program and the opportunity of each program. According to the slide that you see here, the first program is language program. Although there is increased interest in the market for ESL, but it's mainly ties to ESL that has a pathway program to university. The number of Indonesian students looking to study ESL in Canada and in BC is not high. This is due to the high number of schools in Indonesia offering IB and Cambridge program, which are taught in English. So we do not have high number of Indonesian students taking ESL in Canada. So generally, Indonesian students who choose to continue their study abroad would have good English proficiency. Like I said, if the ESL offer extra credit and direct pathway to the university, they are quite popular, particularly to students who do not meet the university's entry requirement. Next slide, please. For secondary school, like ESL, due to the number of schools with IB and Cambridge program, the numbers are not that high. There are a few Indonesian students, as you can see from the slide, taking secondary school in Canada. But secondary school that also offer pre-university and high school completion program are quite popular among the Cambridge O-level graduates who do not want to continue to Cambridge A-level. So there is opportunity there if you do offer pre-university and high school completion program. Next slide, please. The number of Indonesian students studying in college remain high. BC colleges are well known in Indonesia for its university transfer program. They are preferred because of the smaller classroom and also is considered as an alternative access route to the universities. While technical institutes that offer specific skill are also becoming more popular, particularly for those who are looking for skills and more hands-on knowledge that is directly applicable to the workforce. Colleges are also, polytechnic are also popular in Indonesia for its postgraduate program. This is particularly for more mature students looking to explore different fields and for a better work prospect. Another opportunity for polytechnics and institute include the sale of corporate training. So improving the quality of technical vocational education and training is a priority for the government of Indonesia. There is a lot of opportunity to promote TVET in Indonesia. For institutions who are interested in this type of promotions, I will be happy to provide more information separately, specifically just for the TVET opportunity in Indonesia. Next slide, please, Tom. As I mentioned in the beginning of my slide, there were around 45,000 Indonesian students studying abroad according to UNESCO data in 2017. Out of those 45,000, 60% of them are studying in university at the undergraduate level, and there are close to 20% studying at graduate level. Most Indonesian students studying abroad will try to get into a university program. As such, opportunities for Canadian University in Indonesia are very promising. There are also opportunities for BC universities to promote its graduate program, as the government of Indonesia is encouraging students to pursue advanced degrees and is providing scholarship through the Indonesia Endowment Fund for Education, or LPDP. Unfortunately, this opportunity is currently not leveraged by many institutions, not just BC University, but by many universities in Canada, as many recruiters visiting our market are mainly focused on undergraduate recruitment. So I would also encourage universities to also consider promoting their graduate program when they recruit from Indonesia. Next slide, please, Tom. I will touch briefly on institutional partnership. Indonesian university higher educations are interested to partner with Canadian institutions. These are some of the type of partnerships that they are looking for. Unfortunately, we do not have many Canadian institutions currently pursuing institutional partnerships in Indonesia. Australia and the US are the top two countries that are actively pursuing partnership in the country. So for institutional partnership, events such as NAFSA or API would be the best avenue to explore this opportunity with Indonesian institutions. So if you're interested in pursuing institutional partnerships, I will be happy to work closely with institutions and finding the right partner as well. Next slide, please, Tom. So for market entry strategy, I will have these 3 P's that I would recommend to you. The first P is presence. It is important, if your focus is student recruitment, to maintain your presence in our market. So coming regularly for 2 to 3 years will help create a brand name of your institutions. It is important as it will help you gaining some result in this market. So be patient. You cannot only come once and then expecting to get result. You have to come regularly, at least for the next 2-3 years, to create a brand name of your institutions. So presence is really important. The second P is partnership. For those who are focused on student recruitment and do not work with agent, I would like to mention here that the Trade Commissioner Service in Jakarta is working closely with Canadian Education International, or CEI. Some of you may be familiar with CEI in Vietnam. However, CEI Indonesia is not an agent. They are a non-profit foundation whose mandate is to help us promoting Canadian education in the market. CEI help organize our fairs, our annual Edu-Canada Fair, and other promotional activities related to student recruitment. So for institutions who are not working with agents, CEI would be an alternative for you as they provide institutions with value-added services. I will be happy to connect institutions who are interested to know more about CEI Indonesia with their organizations. For those who are working with agents, partnerships with education agents, I recommend that you continue to build your relationship with them. Agents are very popular with prospective students and their parents, as they serve as one-stop shop for applying to schools. Agents are also your frontliner. They can help you with follow-up and continued promotion in the market. Institutions who are interested in institutional partnerships, certainly you can contact me. Like I said, I can help you establish partnerships with local institutions and other key stakeholders for education in Indonesia. The last P is promotions. This is certainly not the least important. For student recruitment, participating in local fairs like the Edukadana fair, school fairs, or agent fairs are recommended. But I would also mention here that you need to consider creative marketing. Nowadays, with the pandemic, a lot of things are done online. Some of the creative marketing that I'm talking here are also considering giving like a free workshop or a webinar, working with local high school to reach to a number of students by offering some of the strength of your institutions in this webinar. So you can sort of give an overview what programs will have the better job prospect, for example, or also you can work with your alumni and you try to do a webinar engaging these alumni who can help promote your institutions in the market. Also, Indonesia are big on social media. So take this into your advantage. Use Instagram, use TikTok, use Twitter and Facebook to reach some of your target audience in Indonesia. Next slide, please, Tom. With regards to updates from the market, due to COVID-19, all educations are currently being done online in Indonesia. For this year, the government has canceled all national exam, particularly secondary as well. So all budgets are currently being allocated to help schools prepare for the new normal and providing school with additional operational funding to help them through this pandemic. In terms of regulation update, this is very important. Effective in 2021, the Ministry of Education and Culture will implement minimum competency assessment and character survey to replace the national exam. This assessment will be carried out in grade 5, 8, and 11. It will assess literacy and numeracy skill. The assessment was created in collaboration with several organizations like the OECD. And for the scoring system, they are referring to the international standard, i.e. the PISA standard, and also the trends in international mathematics and science study. So as of 2021, there will be no more national exam. That said, schools are still allowed to do their own final exam, and graduates of grade 12 will still have their grading that will be used to apply to university as well. Next slide, please, Tom. These are the two upcoming events that we will have. The next one is the Edu Canada Fair that we will do in February 2021. Of course, it will be online. And the next event would be the pre-departure orientation. This is another event that we usually annually do. And we are hoping by then, hopefully if the number of COVID-19 is better, we can do an in-person event by then. So if you have students for your September 2021 intake, please let us know. We can invite them to this event. So with that, I conclude my presentations. This is my contact detail. Please email me if you need more information about our market. I do want to hear from you, so let me know how are you going to approach Indonesia market going forward, and what are some of your plans to enter Indonesia market. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for your presentation. Next, may I invite Thomas from High Commission of Canada in Malaysia to give your presentation.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much, Julia. That was really interesting to hear from another market. So, hello everybody. My name is Tom Abels. As Tom Wang mentioned, I am the Acting Senior Trade Commissioner here at the High Commission of Canada in Malaysia, here in Kuala Lumpur, where it is a balmy 32 degrees. And I often joke that the easiest job in the world may be to be the weather forecaster in Kuala Lumpur, because every day it's 32 degrees and it rains at 5 p.m. So At any rate, though, I want to say thank you very much to BCCIE for inviting me to present on Malaysia's education sector, and for all the participants who are taking the time to attend this webinar. So next slide, please, Tom. So to start with, I'd like to give you a quick snapshot of Malaysia. Malaysia is a very interesting country. I've been here since 2018, and it's quite a hike from Canada, unfortunately. Generally you're looking at about 27 hours of flight, multiple connections. We're really hoping that maybe Air Canada will one day create a direct line here again. But it's a fascinating country, and it's an incredible country, and it's one that if I had to describe the relationship between Canada and Malaysia, I would say the best word to fit it would be potential. So, and you'll see why in a moment. Malaysia itself is a politically and economically stable country, which is open to foreign trade. It is very multicultural, like Canada, and it also has a similar population size like Canada, about 33 million people. And it's considered a fast-growing economy in Southeast Asia. The GDP for Malaysia is about US 943.4 billion, and according to the World Bank, it's expected to achieve high income status in the next few years. 2020 was the original goal, but a couple of things derailed that, particularly COVID. So the interesting thing about Malaysia is that approximately 2/3 of the population fall into the middle to upper income group of consumers. And so looking at the screen, you'll see some quick facts about the country itself. Basically, for comparison, Malaysia is around half the size of Saskatchewan. And yet at the same time, the population density is much higher than in Canada. Next slide, please, Tom. So when you look at the demographics in Malaysia, you'll be struck by the fact that it is, like I said, a very, very multicultural country. It's comprised of numerous ethnicities, with the Bumiputera Malay, which are the indigenous Malay peoples, being numerically dominant. Likewise, although Bahasa Melayu is the official national language, pretty much everyone here speaks English. And it's also a country which was a former British colony, and it follows the same rule of law as Canada, common law. And it's a place where there are a striking amount of similarities, which I was not expecting prior to coming here. Malaysia's population is relatively young as well, with about 27% of the population being less than 15 years old, and the median age being 29.2 years. In comparison, we're a bunch of old fogies in Canada, where our median age is 41.8 years old. Next slide, please. So the education market in Malaysia, again, is one I think of potential, untapped potential. So up until the late 1990s, Malaysia was among the top 10 senders of students to pursue their studies overseas. Now, since then, it's been overtaken by other markets like China, India, and South Korea, but it still remains a very important source market for student recruitment. Since the early 2000s, the number of Malaysian students pursuing post-secondary education abroad has steadily been increasing. So it was previously 44,000, around 44,000 in 2001, and now it's close to 62,000 based on UNESCO statistics. So there is a middle-class population here, there is a population with disposable income, and there is a population that is looking to be educated abroad. The top destinations for Malaysian students are the UK coming in at first place, Taiwan, then Australia, and then the United States. Now, that being said, Canada is becoming an increasingly popular study destination in Malaysia. And it's interesting because when we were still able to leave the office or even go to the office, we would visit schools here, and they would say that, ever since 2016, there has been a more an uptick in interest in Canada as opposed to perhaps studying in the United States, which was experiencing its own, I guess, cultural shift at the time. So there is momentum here for participating, for studying in Canada. People are aware of Canada, and people want to know more about Canada. One of the points that I wanted to make here, and if you take anything away from my presentation, is the fact that although the Canada-Malaysia relationship is, frankly, I think a bit underdeveloped, the Canadian brand name here carries a lot of weight. It is synonymous with high quality. It is considered a safe environment. It is considered a multicultural environment. It is considered a welcoming environment for immigrants and for international students. So, across the board, the name Canada really resonates, and it has a good reputation here. So again, going back to what I said before, I think there is a lot of potential for the Malaysia-Canada relationship, particularly when it comes to institutional linkages and students studying abroad. So in 2019, there were about 1,480 Malaysians studying in Canada, which is an increase of around 7% compared to 2010, which we only had about 1,380 Malaysians. In total, though, we've had about 86,000 Malaysians have studied in Canada during the course of our two countries' relationships. And basically, some of the main drivers for why students are looking to study abroad are the fact that they want a high quality education and they want access to greater job opportunities. Education is also one of the main reasons why Malaysians immigrate overseas. Now, as well, parents play a significant role in the decision-making process here for students in Malaysia. So that means that family income level and financial support remain key factors which influence student choice. Most Malaysian students who choose to study abroad are already proficient in English. So I know that a lot of universities require IELTS testing and whatnot. Those who do study abroad will meet those criteria, I would say, quite easily. English is taught here as a second language in all public schools, and it is the primary medium of instruction at private and most public higher education institutions here in Malaysia. The thing about Malaysia too that I would like to say is that with the rise in medium income, you're seeing just this really amazing transformation happening. I have spoken to people who were here 10 years ago who say that they don't recognize the city, elite Kuala Lumpur today, and everywhere I look, even right now outside, I can see something like 12 different construction sites. Like the sheer amount of development that is happening here is off the scale, and I don't think I don't think I'll recognize the place in 10 years. So this rapid development also parlays over to their education sector, where you've got significant amounts of private and transnational education. You have the establishment of international branch campuses. You've got twinning programs that are happening, and Malaysia, which is working for a self-described goal of trying to become an educational hub in Asia for the region. Next slide, please. So you'll see on screen is the Malaysian education journey, which covers preschool, primary, secondary, and post-secondary education. I'm not going to lie and say that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around this. It does seem a little bit complicated, but if I can try to break it down for you, I will. Malaysia requires 6 years of compulsory primary education, followed by 3 years of lower secondary and 2 years of upper secondary education. Students will graduate in grade 11 with what they call an SPM certificate, which will be considered essentially the completion of high school. Subsequently, students may pursue post-secondary education, which would be grade 12 or STPM, or a matriculation program or a private pre-university program like the Canadian International Matriculation Program, like the CIMP, or the International Baccalaureate, the IB, or the American Degree Transfer Program, or GCEA levels. And so this is often very dependent on which university they would like to enroll in for their undergraduate programs. So as a result, you'll see that, whereas in Canada, you don't really start thinking about what university you're going to go to until you're in grade 11 or grade 12. Oftentimes, students will start thinking about that as early as grade 9, so they can map out their education path accordingly, and especially on what sort of grade 12 level program that they want to enter into. So it's important to get them early, basically. Public schools in Malaysia are free. They adhere to the Malaysian curriculum that is dictated by the Ministry of Education. There are quite a lot of private high schools here as well, and international schools too, which are expensive, but they're perceived to be of higher quality and generally offer international curricula as well as local. So you've got private schools here with UK-based curricula, US-based, Australian, British, Japanese, for example. So it sort of runs the gamut. Malay is the primary language of instruction in Malaysian public schools, while English is taught as a secondary language, whereas English is the primary medium of instruction at most private schools and in private higher education institutions. Next slide, please. So in terms of recruitment opportunities, like I said before, the Canada brand name carries a lot of weight here, and people have I would say an almost overwhelmingly positive impression of Canada. Yes, I mean, when I do these presentations to students, the first question they ask is it true that it snows there 12 months a year? And I say only in Ottawa. No, I'm joking. But it's generally it's a very positive impression, and I really feel like you know, Canada can do more to try to leverage that brand name and that reputation here. So, you know, we are well known for high quality and affordable education. And the main market of recruitment is for undergraduate students. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of interest on the postgraduate level as well. There are also opportunities here to recruit third country nationals that are looking to study in Canada through a credit transfer program or at the postgraduate level. Malaysians are very interested in co-op programs, which are, I know, offered by quite a lot of Canadian institutions. And so we often get questions about those. And I think it's actually one of our value propositions, one of our key selling points when you're looking at, you know, differentiating the Canadian curriculum from others. There are limited opportunities here for K-12 to language schools. Now, it's true that the government has sort of instituted a new policy to further brush up the Malay capacity for English, but a lot of that market has already been gobbled up by the UK and the Australians. There are also more than about 15,000 students here who are learning French as a secondary language, including my own son, in fact. So for French language, there are opportunities here. I just realized that I'm talking too much. I've only got about 4 minutes or so left, so I'll try to hurry through this. Next slide, please. Partnership opportunities. So here's the thing. Malaysia is really, really keen, like I said before, on making itself a regional education hub. And they are really interested in looking for partnership opportunities. Obviously, with the presence of the UK and Australia and the US, they've engaged in a number of twinning programs, franchising programs, credit transfer programs, and the like. They are interested in Canada. They really, really, really want to find institutional partnerships with Canadian institutions. And what we have found, being here on the ground, is that the enthusiasm is coming from Malaysia, less so from Canada. And so if there's any way that I can encourage the Canadian institutions here to really look at Malaysia and to really kind of, you know, open your eyes to the possibilities that this region presents, I think it would be very worth the time to investigate. I think it would be very rewarding, and it would pay off for you. It would give you competitive advantage to be able to sort of break into the market. There are a few Canadian universities that have done this, but I think there's a lot more that, there's a lot of opportunity here. And I would really, really, really encourage those institutions that are on the line to take these words to heart and to really consider Malaysia, because it's the potential is fantastic. So, you know, one of the ways that you can do this would be something along the lines of setting up an international branch campus, and the Malaysians are very supportive about this sort of thing. The schools here would be very, really willing to work with organizations. We would be willing to do so as well at the High Commission. So please do keep that in mind. The possibilities, the first mover advantage of being able to institute some type of institutional relationship in Malaysia, I think, would be fantastic, and we need more enthusiasm from the Canadian side. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges is that, yes, the market is competitive. There's no question about that. Again, our main competitors here are the UK, the Australia, the US, Ireland, and New Zealand. But as Canada's profile grows, you know, we are developing a stronger reputation here. So, I mean, one of the challenges that I've found being a trade commissioner in Malaysia is not only having to sort of wave the Canadian flag in Malaysia, but also to wave the Malaysian flag in Canada, which I just did in the last slide. I think because of the distance between both countries, it's a bit of a out of sight, out of mind. Part of the reason why Australia and the UK are so competitive here is because, you know, with Australia, it's only about a 7-hour flight away. With the UK, it's about 10 hours or so. There's nothing we can do to bridge the geographical distance, but, you know, at the same time, if the Malaysians have shown a willingness to go abroad and to travel abroad and to go to the US, which is not that far away from Canada. So if they're willing to do that, I'm certain that they would be willing to go to Canada as well. So there have been significant changes also in the Malaysian government scholarships and sponsorships programs for overseas students, particularly the JPA and the MARA program, which has resulted in a bit of a reduction in overseas scholarships. Now, as you may know as well, the High Commission of Canada and Malaysia does not provide student permits or visa application services anymore, which we're constantly kind of being drummed over the head with by the business community here. So all of our IRCC required visas and permits and whatnot are processed in Singapore, which I think will be discussed later. So next slide, please. Some, you know, market entry strategies, were you to be interested in Malaysia, and I certainly hope you would be, is to get in touch with school counselors, with university placement centers, to use education agents. There are quite a few education agents here, which are considered an important source for foreign institutions hoping to recruit students. And, you know, if you have any questions, come to the High Commission. We're happy to sort of let you know what our experiences have been, or if you need contacts, we're happy to provide those. As well, participating in education fairs and seminars. Those are very big and very effective methods of recruitment, because there's a lot of emphasis placed on sort of physical interaction, although, you know, obviously now in our post-COVID new reality, it's a bit harder to do. But, you know, we are having virtual fairs like this one, or virtual seminars rather, and so I'd encourage you to consider participating in those. Using social media as well is a big deal. The #1 social media platform here is Facebook, so trying to develop a presence online is also highly encouraged. And then building on existing relationships with Malaysian institutions, with staff and students that have already done exchanges, with research collaborations and the like. Next slide, please. So COVID-19 has had an impact on the education sector here, as it has in the rest of the world. We are currently experiencing our 3rd wave of COVID-19 cases, and the government has implemented what they call a controlled movement control order for pretty much most of Malaysia. And this has also included the closure of educational institutions until basically the 2021 school term, which is expected to begin around January 20th of next year. Students, schools are still, you know, open in the sense that they are providing home-based learning until about December 17th, which is the last day of the school year. Public standardized exams such as the SPM, which is equivalent to the grade 11, the STPM, or the grade 12, they've all been rescheduled to later dates. So the SPM has been rescheduled to February 22nd. The grade 12 STPM has been rescheduled to March 8th, and this will likely affect the application cycle. The majority of physical education affairs have either postponed or gone completely virtual. Previously, Malaysian students have had an option to apply online from the IRCC website or via physical hard copy at the visa application center that we have here in Kuala Lumpur. Now it's highly encouraged to do it only online. And basically, according to local counterparts that we've engaged with, all countries across the board are experiencing significant drops on new Malaysian student applications, with obviously parents' concerns on student safety, the healthcare situation in Canada, as well as travel restrictions. And I will say here that even though the Malaysian numbers are rising, Canada's COVID cases, unfortunately, are about 12 times worse than they are here. So that is certainly something that parents have a weary eye on, and hopefully it gets under control for everybody. So local institutions here are looking for Canadian partners to conduct virtual mobility, cross-classroom, or joint webinar sessions. I think that's those are sort of the priorities right now. Next slide. So in terms of upcoming events, you'll see, like I said before, we have a couple of these virtual fairs that are happening. Again, there's a virtual fair on November 27th next week, and then a virtual networking session on the 30th. And we have over 100 Canadian institutions that are registered for this, and we are happy to connect the institutions with local agents and local institutions for recruitment and partnership purposes. And next slide. And that's it. I know I've spoken a bit too long, so I apologize to everybody. I hope I didn't put anyone to sleep. But my colleague Bethany Tien, she also covers the education sector here in Malaysia, and there she is. She's the real brains behind the operation here. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her, to myself, for any additional information on Malaysia's international education system. So, you know, we here at the TCS are here to help, and don't hesitate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for your presentation. Thank you very much. Next, we will have Alan to give your presentation about the updates and regulation about visa processing. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining this presentation, and thanks to Tom's team for putting everything together. So I am the Migration Program Manager here. For the updates on student visa processing, basically they'll be the same for both Malaysia and Indonesia. I have some stats for Indonesia. I don't have them for Malaysia. As Thomas mentioned, Malaysian applications are processed in our office in Singapore. Unfortunately, we don't have an office in Malaysia anymore, but Thomas, if you're looking to open one, I'd happily go there. KL is a great place. So I'll try not to go too long here, so we have lots of time for questions. So a lot of this Julia has mentioned already in her presentation. And just a word about stats. I think most of our stats kind of align with each other. There may be some instances where they don't, but when that happens, I think if you look at it too closely, your head might explode. So kind of look at the stats as more of indicators of trends rather than you know, trying to match them up exactly. So as Julia mentioned, a lot of the Indonesian students we have are studying in BC, over half of them of the total in Canada. About just over a third of postgraduate work permit holders are in BC. So those are people who have finished their studies and have gone on to get a work permit afterwards. About over 80% of students are studying at the post-secondary level. This is quite normal, especially with a market that's younger, as we see here. I've also been posted in Seoul and Shanghai and Beijing when those markets kind of took off, and it was the same thing there. It tends to be mostly post-secondary at the beginning, and then once things get moving, you'll see a lot more primary and secondary students applying. So last year, we issued over 1,000 study permits for the first time, and we were planning on a record year this year, but a lot of people's plans in 2020 have changed. So we're hoping that we can get back on track for next year, but we'll see. Just a little point. So the numbers in the first part are students who are already in Canada with a study permit. And of course, you know, we issued 1,000 study permits, but many of those people, or most of them, are going for, you know, 2 to 4 year programs. So of course there'll be more than 1,000 students in Canada at any one time. So at the end of 2019, Indonesia had the 3rd highest number of study permit holders in the ASEAN region, followed by Malaysia. And just to note that number 1 is Vietnam, which I think had over 14,000. But not too long ago, they were a 2-person office, which is what we are here in Jakarta now. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, it just exploded, and our office there has quadrupled in size to the point where there's nowhere for people to sit anymore. So who knows, that could also happen in Indonesia or Malaysia. And then finally, also mentioned by Thomas and Julia, the co-op internship post-grad work opportunities are quite popular here when we're at education fairs. This is one of the most popular questions people always asking about the ability to work. Some of them are looking at using that as a springboard to then apply for permanent immigration to Canada, but there's quite a few who are just looking for that Canadian work experience, and then they're coming back to work here. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll sort of talk to you about what things were like pre-COVID and then post-COVID. So as I mentioned, and as you saw in Julia's slide, the student numbers from Indonesia and Malaysia were really on an upward trend. For processing times, I think Jakarta had some of the best times in our network. Our service standard for all study permits is 60 days or 2 months. So Jakarta were about half that. Singapore was right on the service standard, although again they're dealing with 3 or 4 different countries, and Malaysia's one of the countries that has the higher approval rates. So I would guess their processing times would be less than the average listed there. For approval rates, quite high here, running around 80%. A lot of hospitality, co-op students, university, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, close to a half and half split on those. So prior to COVID, which I guess we'd use March 18th as a dividing line for us, we were accepting paper applications at the VAC, or people could apply online. Here in Jakarta, we had about 70% of students already using the online option, which they found more convenient. They can keep their passport. They don't have to send it in till the end, and they can apply at home in their pajamas, and no need to get off to a visitor application center. For postgraduate work permit eligibility, it's based on the time spent studying full-time in Canada. So if you study from 8 months to 2 years, basically matches the length. You get a work permit that matches the length of your studies. If you study over 2 years, then you get the maximum 3-year work permit. And students could also study during the school year up to 20 years. And of course, as I mentioned, some were interested in then sort of using that as a springboard to apply for permanent immigration. So go to the next slide and talk about what's happened post-COVID. So of course, student numbers have cratered everywhere in the world. There's a lot of, we've seen a lot of students who are deferring. So either instead of starting this fall, they've pushed it back to either the January semester, or some have even postponed until fall of 2021. And we've, just from talking to agents, we've heard that, some students are just sort of canceling their plans altogether and kind of waiting it out and see how things go. Processing times are on our website. They always have been, but at the moment they don't really mean anything because there's simply not enough numbers, and the processing time doesn't start until you do biometrics. And in some places, such as here in Indonesia, people have been unable to do biometrics because our visitor application centers are closed. Just in terms of what we're seeing, it's kind of too early, and it's we don't really have the numbers to kind of have good stats, I guess. But just anecdotally, what we're seeing is fewer people going for sort of hospitality programs or co-op, and I would imagine part of that is not being certain that they could actually find suitable employment in Canada. But we're also seeing university level students or the interest in university increasing, or our proportion of students there. So that could be, possibly some students kind of shifting their plans from the U.S. In terms of, our COVID situation is a little bit better, and I think we're seen as a little bit more welcoming as well. The destinations that people are choosing are basically the same. So again, BC is by far the most popular. Ontario is probably second. In terms of where and how to apply, since the summer, we've switched to only online applications. So with very slim exceptions, all applications have to be submitted online, and this is going to continue until at least the end of January. And at that point, the IRCC will make the decision whether to continue that or not. Quite frankly, at some point in the future, all applications will be online anyways. So this could be something that leads us to do that quicker, or it may happen. It may still take a few years to happen, but it will eventually happen. An important announcement was made about the postgraduate work permit eligibility, that it would take into account time spent studying remotely. So people who have stayed in Indonesia or Malaysia to start their studies, as long as they complete 50% of their studies in Canada, the whole length of the program will be eligible in terms of deciding the length of their work permit. So that's something that was welcomed by agents and students here. Also, people who are already, or students who are already in Canada, had that restriction, 20 hours restriction removed if they're working in essential service. Express entry permanent immigration, that's still going on, but of course the numbers this year have dropped quite significantly, but we're looking at upping the numbers in the coming years to kind of even that out. And of course now for the students who are able to go to Canada and who were able to go before, once they arrive, they have that mandatory 14-day quarantine. Let's go to the next slide, Tom. So I'll just give you a little bit of a timeline of what's happened post COVID. So March 18th was when the travel restrictions were announced, and they're still in place now, although there's been some changes along the way. When they expire, nobody knows, I guess. So that March 18th date was important in that at the beginning, if a student had a study permit issued before March 18th, they were still, it was still possible for them to travel to Canada. Anybody who applied afterwards or who had a study permit after that were not. Also, around the same time, there was an evacuation of non-essential staff at many of our embassies worldwide, and we closed about 70% of the visitor application centers. So, you know, it was obviously took quite a hit in terms of productivity and our ability to do work, but at the same time there was less work as well. So in response to that, a lot of the officers who returned from missions that were evacuated became part of this virtual office in Ottawa, which is still in place right now. So they've taken up a lot of the burden in terms of processing. So we haven't lost that much of our processing capacity, which is good. As I mentioned, in April, online applications became mandatory for students, workers, and temporary residents, and it will that will remain in place until at least the end of January 2021. Then in May, we announced a processing pause on study permit applications, and that stayed in place for a few months. And then in July, we introduced two-stage processing. So basically, what that was people could apply, and we would assess it, and then we would approve in principle pending submission of biometrics, medicals, or any other documents that were outstanding. And that initial approval, and we sent a letter that would allow them to begin their virtual studies in Canada. I noticed someone had asked a question about that, why we're not doing that still. That the two-stage processing was only for people who applied up until September 15th. So that's no longer in place. We're just, at this point, we're just processing as normal. And then in August, the announcement was made about the change to the postgraduate work permit eligibility criteria. And finally, in October, I believe it was the 20th, the travel exemptions for students were announced. So basically, if you're going to a designated learning institution, a school that had received the go-ahead from the provincial health authority that they were allowed to, they had a plan that was approved to welcome students for in-person learning, then they could go ahead and do that. So there's a link on our website which says all the schools that are eligible for students to go and study in person. Next slide, please. Okay, just a few final things to mention. In addition to these students who are on the list, anyone traveling for an essential purpose can still enter Canada. There's a list of exemptions on our website that includes immediate family members with eligible students. So a lot of times the parents will want to travel with their children to sort of help them settle in when they go to Canada. So they can possibly be exempted. It's a little bit tricky in that CBSA is the agency who will make the decision as to whether someone can board a plane or can enter Canada. So what we've been doing here is we will liaise with them and make sure that we're on the same page with all of the people that we're issuing visas to, and our CBSA officer is actually based in Malaysia. Also to note that we're not refusing anyone, any students for non-compliance. So what happens, as an example, when they apply online, they'll automatically get a letter saying you have to do biometrics by such and such a date. That date's already been extended for the initial letter, but for us here in Indonesia, because our VACs have been closed for so long, even those dates, deadlines have passed, but we will wait and give everyone time to do that. So we're not going to refuse anybody for not doing biometrics when they, at this moment, they can't. Final thing, or final couple things, is students who are planning on studying for less than 6 months don't need a study permit. They can go on a TRV, which is basically a visitor visa, but it has a different coding on it. Those people are not exempt from the travel restrictions. But if you have a study permit, which you can still apply for even if you're going for less than 6 months, then you can be exempt if your school's on the list. So that's an important note, and we're going to sort of promote that information. And then final thing is we have noticed just anecdotally a lot. We're getting a lot more emails from people saying, you know, I got this job offer or whatever. Is it true? And it's not. They're you know, it's not uncommon when you have these difficult times that people try to take advantage. So just as kind of a caution to make sure that you know, for your students, that they're aware of these things and make sure they have a reputable agent. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.